Matthew 25, Jesus' call to serve the marginalized and the politicians who contradict it. In Matthew 25:31-46, Jesus presents the parable of the sheep and goats, a vivid depiction of the final judgment where the righteous are distinguished by their compassion for the least of these, the hungry, thirsty, strangers, naked, sick, and imprisoned. Jesus declares, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Matthew 25:40 NIV. This teaching demands active love for the marginalized, including immigrants fleeing hardship and racial minorities facing systemic discrimination. Yet, several prominent politicians, led by former President Donald Trump, profess Christianity while promoting rhetoric and policies on race and immigration that starkly contradict Jesus' mandate. Their inflammatory language, such as Trump's claim that immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country, dehumanizes the very people Jesus calls his followers to serve. Some also cherry-pick Old Testament laws, like those in Leviticus, to justify cultural stances, e.g., against LGBTQ+ rights, while ignoring Christ's teachings on compassion. This article examines how these politicians fail to embody Matthew 25's call, focusing primarily on their actions regarding racism and immigration. Matthew 25, a call to compassion. The parable of the sheep and goats is uncompromising. Serving the marginalized is equivalent to serving Jesus himself, while neglecting them is akin to rejecting him. Matthew 25:45. In today's context, the least of these includes immigrants seeking safety and opportunity, as well as racial minorities enduring systemic inequities. Jesus' command to welcome strangers and care for the vulnerable transcends political agendas, demanding that Christians prioritize love over exclusion. For those who claim to follow Christ, this teaching is not optional, it is the heart of his message. Donald Trump's poisoning the blood rhetoric and its contradiction. As the leader of the modern Republican Party and a self-professed Christian, Donald Trump has repeatedly used dehumanizing language that directly contradicts Matthew 25's call to welcome strangers. Since September 2023, Trump has claimed that undocumented immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country, a phrase he reiterated at campaign rallies in New Hampshire, December 2023, and Iowa, as well as in a Truth Social post. He has falsely asserted that migrants are criminals from prisons and mental institutions across Africa, Asia, and South America, framing them as a threat to national identity. This rhetoric, widely condemned for echoing Adolf Hitler's blood-poisoning language in Mein Kampf, dehumanizes immigrants and fosters fear, directly opposing Jesus' mandate to welcome strangers with compassion. Trump's policies further reflect this contradiction. His campaign promises for a second term include mass deportations, detention camps, and ending birthright citizenship, which would strip U.S.-born children of undocumented parents of their constitutional rights. These measures target vulnerable immigrants, many fleeing violence or poverty, whom Jesus identifies as the least of these. Trump's rhetoric and policies, such as his 2018 claim that immigrants infest the country or his 2015 call for a Muslim ban, also amplify racial and ethnic division, ignoring the systemic racism faced by minorities and contradicting Jesus' call to love without distinction. Despite claiming Christian faith, Trump's actions prioritize exclusion over the compassion demanded by Matthew 25. Other politicians echoing the contradiction. Trump's rhetoric and policies have set the tone for other politicians who profess Christianity but enact measures that marginalize immigrants and racial minorities, further contradicting Matthew 25. Below are additional examples. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, RGA. Greene has echoed Trump's anti-immigrant stance, promoting his America First agenda with calls for mass deportations and border wall funding. In 2019, she supported conspiracy theories about white genocide fueling racial division. Her opposition to the DREAM Act, which would protect undocumented immigrants brought to the U.S. as children, and her inflammatory rhetoric against minorities clash with Matthew 25's command to welcome strangers and serve the vulnerable. Greene's claim to Christian values is undermined by her focus on exclusion over compassion. Senator Ted Cruz, RTX. Cruz has aligned with Trump's hardline immigration policies, opposing pathways to citizenship for undocumented immigrants and supporting family separations at the border during Trump's first term. In 2023, he called such reforms law-breaking rewards, ignoring the plight of immigrants fleeing persecution. On race, Cruz has dismissed systemic racism, criticizing critical race theory in 2021 as divisive while overlooking the experiences of marginalized communities. His opposition to voting rights protections further disenfranchises minorities, contradicting Jesus' call to care for the oppressed in Matthew 25. Governor Ron DeSantis, RFL. DeSantis has followed Trump's lead with policies like Florida's 2023 immigration law, which penalizes businesses employing undocumented workers, and his 2022 stunt of flying migrants to Martha's Vineyard, treating vulnerable people as political props. His voting restrictions and redistricting maps, which courts struck down for diluting minority voting power, exacerbate racial inequities. These actions defy Matthew 25's mandate to welcome strangers and care for the marginalized, prioritizing political gain over Christ's teachings. Representative Lauren Boebert, RCO. Boebert has amplified Trump's rhetoric calling for mass deportations and opposing refugee resettlement. Her 2021 remarks labeling Representative Ilhan Omar a black Muslim as part of a jihad squad perpetuate racist and Islamophobic tropes. By demonizing immigrants and minorities, Boebert's actions contradict Matthew 25's call to serve the least of these, aligning instead with divisive narratives that ignore Jesus' ethic of love. Cherry-picking Leviticus, a secondary hypocrisy. While the primary contradiction lies in these politicians' failure to show compassion on issues of race and immigration, some, including Trump, also selectively cite Old Testament laws like Leviticus 18:22 to oppose LGBTQ+ rights. For instance, Green and Boebert have invoked these verses to argue against gender-affirming care or same-sex marriage, claiming to uphold biblical values. Yet they assert that Jesus' fulfillment of the law, Matthew 5:17, nullifies its ceremonial aspects like dietary rules, while retaining Leviticus for cultural battles. This cherry-picking is inconsistent with the New Testament's focus on love and inclusion, Galatians 3:28. By prioritizing legalism over Matthew 25's call to serve the marginalized, these politicians reveal a faith more aligned with political strategy than with Christ's teachings. The consequences of divisive rhetoric and policies. The rhetoric and policies of Trump and his allies have profound impacts. Trump's poisoning the blood comments, repeated multiple times in 2023 and 2024, have been linked to white supremacist ideologies and have fueled real-world violence, as seen in the 2018 Pittsburgh synagogue and 2019 El Paso shootings, where attackers used similar language. A 2024 poll found that 1/3 of Americans, including 61% of Republicans, agree with this rhetoric, showing its dangerous normalization. Policies like mass deportations or ending birthright citizenship, as Trump proposes, would disrupt millions of lives, targeting vulnerable immigrants whom Jesus calls his followers to welcome. Similarly, rhetoric that denies systemic racism or targets minorities, as seen in Green's and Boebert's comments, perpetuates division, ignoring the least of these who face discrimination. Globally, exclusionary policies have parallels. In Georgia, the 2024 anti-LGBTQ+ laws passed by the Georgian Dream Party, followed by the murder of transgender model Kasaria Abramidze, illustrate how dehumanizing rhetoric can foster violence. While focused on LGBTQ+ issues, this mirrors the dehumanization of immigrants and minorities in the US, and where Trump's rhetoric sets a tone that others amplify, creating fear and marginalization, a call to embody Christ's teachings. Matthew 25 demands that those who claim to follow Jesus serve the marginalized, immigrants, racial minorities, and the poor without exception. Donald Trump, as the leader of this political movement, sets a tone of exclusion with his poisoning the blood rhetoric and policies, echoed by Green, Cruz, DeSantis, and Boebert. Their actions contradict Jesus' call to welcome strangers and care for the oppressed, prioritizing fear and division over compassion. Their selective use of Leviticus to target other groups only deepens this hypocrisy, revealing a faith misaligned with Christ's teachings. To honor the Christ they profess to worship, these politicians must reject dehumanizing rhetoric and policies that harm the vulnerable. Jesus' words in Matthew 25 challenge them to feed the hungry, welcome the stranger, and serve the least of these with love. Anything less risks the judgment reserved for those who fail to see Christ in the marginalized. Matthew 25:41-46. By Scott Young, aka Sin Famous Gamer.